There's a proposed new law that would make crossing the channel without permission illegal, a criminal offence. So as soon as the migrants arrived on our beach, instead of being taken to a four-star hotel or some comfortable accommodation and told enjoy yourself, do what you will, maybe disappear into the ether, walk out of wherever you're staying, never to be seen again, or stick around, and wait 2 years while your application for asylum is processed, you get charged with a criminal offence, or you get detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, either in a prison or a detention centre. I think the thinking is if that message gets around, perhaps the migrants will stay in France. Seems like a step in the right direction to me. I wonder what our next guest, Anne Widdecombe, former Conservative MP and Brexit Party MEP, thinks. Good evening, Anne.
Good evening. Well, I've long advocated a system of universal detention for all asylum seekers. So the instant somebody says, I claim asylum, my belief is that they should then be held in a secure reception centre. That does not mean a prison, but it means a secure reception centre. That has various benefits. One you've already identified, which is it has a deterrent effect, because if the message goes out that if you come to Britain with a false claim, you'll be detained, you'll be dealt with quickly, you'll be sent home. That is a deterrent message, whereas at the moment the message is come to Britain, and if you succeed in getting in here, you're very, very unlikely ever to have to leave. And of course, it is the easiest country to disappear in. We don't have national identity cards. So we have a flourishing black economy. So people can very, very easily disappear. But the other advantage, if I may just add that, is this. It would mean that the genuine ones, those who really did have a case for asylum, could be identified quickly instead of clogged up in a queue for 2 years, as you rightly say. And those to whom we were going to say no, we know where they are.
Yeah, it always struck me as a kind of madness that when these people arrive, they're taken to various standards of accommodation, some of it very luxurious. One of the hotels they were using to put migrants in was a four-star hotel with a spa and golf course. That's not to say that some of them didn't exactly get luxurious digs. There were complaints about the place they would get, the former military barracks they were staying in Folkestone. They didn't like that. They said that was degrading and dehumanizing. However, the point being about all of these places were, once we took these people here, who were essentially here sort of illegally, they arrived here illegally, claim asylum, we take them to these hotels or resting places, accommodation centres, they were completely free to just walk out the gates, never to be seen again.
Well, of course, and that's why I have. And I mean, I put this forward at party conference in 1999. It's why I've always been in favour of, as I say, detaining all asylum seekers, regardless of how they get here. Once somebody says, I claim asylum, unless they've been processed abroad, of course, if somebody says, I claim asylum, then from that moment, we should be able to know exactly where they are. But the problem here is that once somebody does say, I claim asylum, our international obligations, I'm not talking about the EU, I'm talking about an international obligation, is that we have to consider their claim. Now, I think you can do that much more effectively if you know where they are and you can quiz them on the spot and you can go back with supplementary questions and you can also test the claims they make. I mean, very often it's very common ploy. They'll say they've come from a country where there is persecution. They haven't come from that country at all. Sometimes they don't even speak the language. And another ploy, never mind the boats coming over, another very big used ploy is that they arrive at Heathrow. They've lost their documents en route, generally down the plane's lavatories. They then stay airside for hours on end, and I do mean hours, sometimes a day, hours on end. Then they present at the immigration desks, and you haven't a clue where they've come from.
Well, yes, and it wouldn't contravene our international obligations, would it? If say, a dinghy full of migrants land on the beach, and as you say, those people smugglers, those awful villains at the heart of this dreadful situation, they always tell them, get rid of your documents, and as soon as you land, claim asylum, you'll be fine. Yep. We could process their asylum seeking while detaining them for potentially committing a criminal offence. So this proposed new law would be a good step forward, wouldn't it?
Yes, indeed. And if they were genuine asylum seekers, they wouldn't have committed any offence, because we're genuinely seeking asylum.
Yeah.
And you haven't passed through another safe country. That's a big one. And you haven't passed through another safe country. Then you are entitled to enter a country by subterfuge and then immediately say, I claim asylum. That's different.
Well, but the thing is, I take your point about the airports where they've flown in from God knows where, but when they've come across from France, they've come from a perfectly safe country.
Yep.
So by definition, their claim for political asylum here is decidedly dodgy, is it not?
Yes, and then under the Dublin Convention, if the asylum seeker is supposed to claim asylum in the first safe country he comes to. Now consider Saint-Gat in France, where a whole load of migrants spend all day, every day, not applying for asylum in France, which is signed up to all the same international treaties as we are, but instead trying to get unlawfully into Britain in a lorry, unlawfully into Britain. And why? The great magnet is that once you get here, you're very rarely, you are sometimes, but you're very rarely going to be sent away.
You and I, Anne, have discussed before the kind of plethora of proposals that seems to come out of Priti Patel's mouth. She is constantly announcing initiatives to tackle this ongoing migrant crisis, and most of them don't amount to a hill of beans, and they look pretty kind of flimsy when you first hear them. But for the first time, this one seems like a very good concrete proposal that could actually work.
Let's have the detail. Let's know where they're going to be housed, because bear in mind the numbers that come in, you're not going to stick them in the police station overnight. Where they're going to be housed, what it's going to cost to set up those centres. And I'm not suggesting it's prohibitive, because I did this work once before and I know that it's not. It can be done. But we need to see the detail. We don't just need the talk, we need to see the walk.
Yes, because what happened in Australia, they cured their migrant problem because the migrants were coming from Indonesia to the north coast of Australia. Australia let it be known that once you get here, we stick you into a detention centre and we process your application for asylum in 3 weeks. And we're letting you know right now it's likely to be a negative result. And the word got around and their migrant crisis was kind of cured. So the important thing in these areas, is it not, is to send a message to these migrants that your attempt to get here by nefarious means aren't going to work. This proposal that perhaps you end up in prison, charged with a criminal offence, that might send a message to discourage them.
Well, it might. It might, but I don't actually set great store by the fact you're making it a criminal offence. It already is a criminal offence to enter a country unlawfully. And of course, if you're going to put them in prison, the next thing we'll have is, well, we've got overcrowded prisons, and the next thing we'll have is they've got to be bailed, and the next thing we'll know is they've gone. So make it secure, absolutely specific, secure reception centres, I always call them, rather than detention centres, because you're also sometimes receiving children. So secure reception centres where we know where they are. And come on, Priti, where are you going to site these things? What's it going to cost? How many are they going to hold? We need to know.
But you'll concede that this is one of the better suggestions that Priti has come up with.
Well, it's a suggestion that's been on the table for a long time, from me in '99, then from Oliver Letwin. For some reason, it was dropped by David Cameron. This suggestion has been around a very long time. So if she does do something, fine, but let's see it, not just hear the talk about it.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much for your time, Anne.